All right, here's the deal, everybody, okay? Thank you. They are going to be serving the food while Barney is speaking because he came in from far away. All right, that was good. So anyway, the servers can serve as quietly as you can. The others of you kind of stop your bullshitting, and we can get started. First of all, I want to welcome you all to tonight's dinner and thank you very much for your support of the Democratic Party. You're going to hear from what, in my mind, one of the great liberals ever to serve in the House of Representatives. I had the pleasure, I think Barney and I were about maybe together 6 years before I left. He became a real power in the House, and especially as part, the better part of the Dodd-Frank bill. His was the good part. Chris got a little shaky at the end. But I first heard about Barney Frank back, I believe it was in the 70s, and there was a friend of mine who served in the legislature with him, the first openly gay member of the legislature, Elaine Noble. And she was good. They reapportioned the congressional districts, or no, the House districts, state House districts in Massachusetts, because I guess they had a ton of them and they had to cut it down. And I asked Elaine, I said, well, what happens to you? She says, I'm going to be out. And I says, that's really the shits. And she said, no, Barney Frank's going to be the one that's going to get the seat, and he's as good as you're ever going to find anywhere. That he's just a good, solid guy. And coming from somebody who lost their seat because of reapportionment, those of us in politics know that you can't possibly get a better accomplishment than that. So with all of that very short thing, I want to introduce my former colleague. Man was a friend when we served together, somebody who blessed us by coming out here to speak at this dinner, the great Barney Frank.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I know we want to get things moving, so the people in charge, I was sitting next to my old friend John, my former colleague, and someone asked if it would be a problem for me to be speaking while you're eating dinner. And I said, no. John and I used to give speeches to a house that included Newt Gingrich, and if we could do that, what the hell is dinner? I will say this too, I do not have any graphics, so you need not look at me. You don't have to crane your neck. You can look at your food, and there's nothing illustrating what I say. I am also very pleased to be here with a lot of my former colleagues, obviously seeing Leader Pelosi, who has been a great national leader and clearly has done more on the specific issue of LGBT rights than anybody in American history. I'm also pleased that I saw earlier, I don't know if she's still here, my former colleague with whom I worked so closely when we did the best we could on financial reform, Maxine Waters, who continues that great work. I want to talk about America's relationship to the rest of the world. I've always been an internationalist. I've always thought that isolationism was a great mistake. I still do. But it's now clear to me that there are forms of internationalism. There is a form in which America plays a constructive role in the rest of the world, using some of our resources and some of our expertise. I'm very proud of the role America played with regard to Ebola in Liberia. Liberia is Ebola-free today. America played a very important part in doing that. In the financial reform bill, we included, Maxine was a big part of this, 2 provisions that try to protect people in poorer countries from the financial exploitation from multinational corporations, whether it's the conflict diamonds in Congo or another bill that I'm very proud came to us through the good auspices of Bono, not Bono. I know I'm in California. This was Bono. And it was a provision that said if you are a company and you are taking minerals out of any other country, you're an American company, you have to make public what you have paid, because too often the money for the scarce resources have gone to a handful. So yes, I want to play a major role, but we now have a pattern in which there is an effort to have American policy serve the purpose of enhancing America's prestige, our leadership role. And I plan to question this notion that America must be the leader of the world. That sounds very impressive, but I need to know, where are we leading people to? And what are we leading, and whom? And too much of this is the notion that if America does not preserve order in the world, things will go to hell. And it is not simply, I think, a great overreach, but it is now clear there is a pattern of the resources we need to make this a fairer society at home being used wastefully in this fight for international prestige. One has to do with military spending. I read an article in the Wall Street Journal 3 years ago after President Obama was reelected, and it said, these were 2 Bush Air Force guys, they were worried that with Obama as the new president, as reelected president, there would not be enough done to expand the Air Force. And it said it's true that America has no American has been killed by hostile air power in 50 years. And America dominates the airwaves over every battlefield. But we need to have an Air Force that can respond to any trouble spot, anywhere, anytime, any place in the world. That drains us from the resources we need. But there is now a more pressing example of this. And it is the insistence on the part of the president and many of his supporters that we have to sign a trade bill with many of the nations in Asia. And the problem is that a large part of the rationale for that, from the president and others, ignores its economic impact. We are told, and it is important to look at this carefully as we carry on this debate, try to stop this in its current form. We are told that it is important for America's leadership role in the world for us to make this treaty with the nations in the Pacific, that the notion of enhancing our position vis-a-vis China in terms of influence in Asia is the dominant factor, even if it causes damage economically at home. There is a very respected columnist named Thomas Friedman who wrote in the New York Times last Monday that it is essential that we pass the trade bill. And he said, now, I know there's an economic issue. I will leave to the president to explain how to protect the workers who will be harmed. Well, we're not prepared to do that. The president has said, inaccurately, that those of us opposing his legislation are behind the times and are arguing from old economics. The reverse is the case. 30 years ago, there was a conservative consensus in the economic profession. First of all, they believed the free market would solve every problem. The deregulation that we suffered, the non-regulation, very well-respected economists, including some now liberals, supported it. We were told that the minimum wage was going to hurt workers. That has clearly now been repudiated. And we were told that international trade was a general good thing. It is now undisputed that increased international trade from an economy like ours has two effects. First of all, it does increase overall wealth. Secondly, it exacerbates the unfairness with which that wealth is distributed. When we trade, people who make high-end goods, people who bring a lot of intellectual property to bear, people who are engaged in the very sophisticated manufacture of things, they do better. But people engaged in the basic kinds of work that get done do worse. There's a magazine called The Economist. It's the Bible of the free traders, published in England. And in the April 25th issue, they said, yes, it is true that trade in a rich country hurts the wages of most workers because of the way it works. And this is what the president's ignoring. But here's the problem. I heard the president in an interview, when asked about this, say, well, yes, but I have a lot of programs that I support that will offset that. And it's true. President Obama has put forward a number of things that would help offset the unfairness in our economy. But the problem is this. Every single one of those is now being killed by the Republicans in Congress. And those same Republicans in Congress and the business community that supports them have one high priority, the trade bill. Why would anyone expect those of us who want an increased minimum wage and a full support for financial regulation, maybe even toughening it, who want to tax hedge funds at a fair rate and not give them this capital gains break, that want to tighten the tax laws so people can't go overseas in name only to avoid taxes, when we want them to stop breaking unions, because it is clear now, again, the economists acknowledge, the erosion of the ability of unions to protect their workers is one of the major factors in the decline in the economic fairness in this country. Why would we be asked to go to people who are killing every piece of legislation that's important to our values and that will help make this a fairer country and give them what they most want? So I want to say, when people say, well, you opposed to the president's position on trade, I said, yes, I am. He doesn't understand how to trade. He doesn't understand that supporting the right-wing agenda, now others want it as well, but giving the business community and the Republicans what they most want, expanded international trade, while letting them kill everything else that he has proposed in the economic area, anything that has to do with fairness, is not just bad economics. It's kind of stupid. Now, when I was in the House and there were people who were against everything I thought important, it rarely occurred to me that what I needed to do was to help them get something that they want. Sometimes I would, but only after we talked about some mutual agreements, only after we got something we wanted. And in this case, the argument for trade, for saying if they can clean up the trade bill so it doesn't have this ability for foreign businesses to sue and invalidate our regulations, and have the worker and environmental standards, I would support such a bill if it was accompanied by an increase in the minimum wage to $10 or more. Taxation, tax changes that kept countries from going overseas with their tax revenues and their work. A bill to put Americans back to work on infrastructure. And if the deaths that are Curd and Amtrak haven't made the point of the price we pay for neglecting those basic needs, then I don't know what will, except to say we will not pass any of the legislation they are seeking until we get a trade. And in this case, it's not simply I'll give you what you want if you give me what I want. Trade, and again, this really needs to be emphasized, trade increases the overall wealth in a wealthy country, but it exacerbates the unfairness of the distribution. The people who make the kind of sophisticated, high-end, technological, intellectually property-heavy goods that we export get richer. And the people who do the basic manufacturing and do basic work get poorer. And the answer is they should not have the one without the other. So I was asked by a journalist when I made this argument, well, are you trying to block trade? I said, well, why don't you go ask the other side why they're blocking the minimum wage increase, why they're blocking a simple change in taxation so that companies do not have an incentive to evade taxes in America and then deprive us of the kind of funding we need. That's part of what we need to do. The other part, and here the president has been more right than wrong, but I am afraid that the pressure on him may be too much. Two of the best decisions President Obama made were to withdraw from Iraq and to withdraw from Afghanistan. He is under pressure to send our troops back in. And in fact, here's the argument. The Wall Street Journal wrote an editorial criticizing him for withdrawing troops from Iraq and Afghanistan and said, we need to show them the same kind of support that we showed South Korea and Western Europe. We have had troops in South Korea for 62 years since the Korean War ended. We have had troops in Western Europe for 66 years since the World War II ended. I take it back, 70. I sometimes understate. The point is that what they are asking for is an indefinite commitment costing tens of billions of dollars a year of an American military presence until we are able to say that Iraq is capable of a coherent democratic society. I wish it were possible for us from outside to make Iraq a coherent democratic society. I wish by our intervention we could end corruption in Afghanistan and create a civil polity there. I also wish I could eat more and not gain weight. And what I've learned is when I act on my wishes, even though they are unrealistic, I don't do very well. So here is the deal. I do want America to intervene to protect people who are being unfairly attacked. I want America to be an advocate for human rights. I'm very proud that in one area, one of the things that we have begun under President Obama and Secretary Clinton was an American effort to intervene on behalf of LGBT people being persecuted in Africa and elsewhere. And that is now fully part of the human rights mandate of the American government. But sending in the American military, and they are the best military in the history of the world. They're great people. They can do what a military can do better than anyone else. What a military can do is to stop bad things from happening. A military cannot make good things happen. They cannot bring about a reconciliation of Shia and Sunni and Kurd. They cannot bring democracy. They cannot bring a respect for civil society. And it is an enormous mistake for us to keep trying. We Democrats face a problem. We have seen a drop-off in the votes for the programs that we support from a lot of white working-class men. We should acknowledge this. And many of these are people who are voting against what we believe are their interests. There are a variety of explanations. One was that they were so angry that the Democrats were pro-gay. In fact, the country's getting more and more pro-gay while we still keep losing their votes. That's clearly not the issue. What we have, I think, is the recognition, the result of the fact that as the American economy has evolved over the past couple of decades, we have seen this increase in economic unfairness. And diminishing economic unfairness, reducing that situation of an income gap, seeing that increased American wealth is shared fairly in a way that it is not now, is not just important for its own moral worth, which it is, but as long as we have the white working class correctly angry because their economic position has eroded, although I believe incorrect in assessing the causes, we will not have the ability to do other things that are necessary for the quality of life. Our ability to maintain the political support to deal with climate change depends on our winning back some of the people who vote for those who would deny science's rationale. Our ability to get rational policy elsewhere is impeded when we have people voting no. I think it is essential that we do two things in this area. First of all, and I hope this becomes the platform of every Democrat, first of all, we say that there will be no trade bill or any other measure that exacerbates economic unfairness unless it is part of a package of measures that diminish it. That means the minimum wage bill. It means fairer taxation. It means putting construction workers back to work. It means making it possible for people to go to school. I urge the president to take yes for an answer. We are the ones who support every aspect of his domestic program, except the trade bill as a standalone bill. He should not be siding with those who agree with him on the sole issue of trade and are killing everything else. He ought to come with us and put together a package. Secondly, we should continue to reduce the American military budget beneath the bloated area it is today. We would have well over $1 trillion if we hadn't gone to war in Iraq. I accept some of my friends on the left get worried when I say this. I agree America should be the strongest nation in the world. People say, well, that's xenophobic, but here's the deal. Just as a matter of fact, somebody will be the strongest nation in the world. If I thought Denmark could be the strongest nation in the world, I would be very relaxed. That's a very nice country. But as I look at the candidates for being the strongest nation in the world, better us than them. But we don't need the ability to intervene militarily anytime there is trouble, anywhere in the world, anytime, any place. That's what we are being told we need. So the president should be withdrawing that. There is one other area where I believe we need a change in policy, and this is one. I don't always agree with my friends on the left that the voters are ahead of the elected officials. Frankly, there have been times when I think that has not been the case. I will tell you, even when I was in office, it seemed to me that politicians were often mistaken. The media becomes more and more a swift pain in the ass. But the voters are no bargain either. There is a combination of people bringing out the worst in each other. But there is one area where the voters are clearly ahead. They understand how unwise and wasteful it is to be locking up people for smoking marijuana. And we need to go beyond that. We need to go beyond that. And my conservative friends like to attack the war on poverty. In fact, if you're looking for a war that has ended badly, unlike a real war like Iraq, which was a terrible disaster, look at the war on drugs. It has called forward a lot of expenditure. It is also clearly the place in America, it's now obvious, that's where racism is at its worst in practice, in the enforcement of the drug laws. If we were to stop locking people up because they make unwise choices about substances, if we reduce the American military to the level that would allow us to defend all of our legitimate interests, but not unwisely send the military in to try and resolve political situations that they can't handle, if we would tell our friends in Western Europe that it's time for them to defend themselves if they feel worried and bring our troops home from Western Europe, and pass an economic package that would include an increase in trade that was protected against undermining American rules and regulations and included a number of measures in the tax field and otherwise that strengthened unions, raised the minimum wage, made the tax system fairer, and prevented a tax incentive from going overseas. That is a program that I think we can, as Democrats, very proudly support. And those who try to put responsible Democrats on the defensive because they're not supporting trade, we can turn that around. Sure, we would support a trade bill as part of a package that included responsible, sound economic measures that undid some of its negatives. I am very pleased to be here because I think if we are capable of putting forward that kind of a program, in this case, the support of California Democrats is going to be very important. So thank you for your continued work. California was the one place where we did better last year. I think with the kind of programs, I have no great love for losing. Martyrdom is not a great place to be. I think we have a program where we can appeal to people, to white working class men, acknowledging that they have been the victims of economic shifts to their negative impact and make things better. And I look forward to our doing that. Thank you.